Just thinking. There we go. Worked. Yay. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Get started. There we go. Cool. All right. Awesome. Then I'll go to Sherman. So today is our last product session. It's session 4. You're going to transition, I believe, to Henry, who's going to probably talk about sales next month. So I will be bringing a lot of the stuff together, which we've talked about over the prior sessions. If you haven't attended the prior sessions, no worries at all, because we're going to touch on them at the beginning here. All right. So just a reminder, if you haven't met me, this is me. My background's in product management. I got into product management through user experience research. I'm from Silicon Valley. I grew up in Cupertino. So if you have an Apple computer, you know what Cupertino is. And so my whole ethos is technology. That's what I do for fun. That's who I am. So it kind of all comes together. After leading product teams for over 20 years, I realized that I liked coaching people because I liked building up my team. I liked helping the people really reach their potential, push them further, etc. And so now I do a combination of product and product coaching. And the furry creature that I was trying to appease earlier, that's a picture of him. So that is Lancaster. And so I'd love to learn more about you guys. I know I've seen some of you before in prior sessions, but if you can take a second and just introduce yourself into the chat. So in the Google chat, just introduce yourself. What does deliver mean to you? Because that's the session we're going to about to dive into, and what's the best way to find you. So just put it into chat. Meeting promises. Awesome. So I'm going to keep us going. But please, continue to add your introduction, location, how to connect. Oh, a San Francisco, New York person. I am very jealous. All right. Awesome. All right. So keep that sharing going. And the 4 phases, stages, sessions we've been going through, you can see them here. We started off with discover, went into define, develop, and now we're in deliver. And this is, typically when people talk about design thinking or folks talk about a product development lifecycle. Some folks prefer software development lifecycle. This is a really simple approach to a product development lifecycle. You go through those 4 phases, just as we've been going through over the last sessions. And so again, you can extrapolate it into a whole variety of different things, but I like it just because it's straightforward. Discover, as we talked about in the first session, is just about, what's the problem that our customer is facing or the problem that we think they're facing. That's often, if you have a user research background, that's often where user research gets involved to truly understand what the need is. What are some of the opportunities to enter a space? What are some of the competitors there? So you get an overarching vision. And then you take all that information and then you turn it into define. What am I actually, think I should create? And that's usually where we, get into a really, really kind of narrow prototype that we start to get feedback on, allows you to iterate, allows you to get more feedback. And so often that discover and define is a circle. And so you can iterate back and forth between those. Once you've kind of got it locked down around really what's going to resonate with your customers, you hop the product definition because you define what you're going to actually build. And you start building something more tangible, has more elements to it, has more richness to it. So that's where you're really starting to develop. You test what, you want to test in regards to what really resonates with the customers, what are some of the capabilities they're seeking, and then deliver, you set it free. And you set it free to be able to listen and learn and see what the feedback is. And again, you've been gathering feedback along the way. So again, my bad designing skills, if I was a better designer, there'd be iterations and loops everywhere throughout this. It looks like it's a process where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, but typically you hop all over the place. But the stages are still there to give an understanding of what you need to have, what you need to gather from your customers, as well as what you ultimately need to hand off to your development partners, designers. You're working alongside them, but they need to know what to build, et cetera. But ultimately, you're trying to get from a problem a customer has to, the solution. All of us at some point in time in our lives are probably famous for starting at the solution and trying to backtrack into identifying what a problem is. That can be interesting because what we have in our heads comes with a lot of bias in it. just because we're humans. And so how do we, start to break down that bias? And that's why if you start with a problem and what the real problem is the customer has, that can really help you work towards a solution that actually addresses the need that they're having. Other, iterations of it, here's a better visualization that's got the iteration in there. So again, you're iterating through, what the problem is, through the definition, and then the diverge and converge is just a really good summary of, like, there's a lot of brainstorming that happens. You need to then bring it together to identify what you're going to carry forward. And so that happens a lot. But again, depending on what you like, there are a lot of different ways to visualize this. This one, has that iterative cycle and just shows how you're going through the different stages, but also the way that you're thinking a lot very broadly and how that brings it together to be able to go to the next step. This one's even more fun. So again, that define goes to discover, develop, and deliver. So all these different ways, and it shows you more steps that you may be going through. I just, again, wanted to showcase that, we've gone a certain approach. It's quite, a common approach in the product world, but there's lots of different ways to visualize it. This one, again, shows a lot of the interactivities that you have along the way, a lot of the converge and diverge that were in the prior slides. Here, it's just showing that as arrows where you would get a lot of it in and then bring it back together. So again, a lot to choose from depending on which visual that works best for you. So we've gone through all those 4 stages. And so that first phase, that stage that we went to was discover. So just wanted to give a refresher around, what we were talking about. And that was really about the customers, getting a great understanding around the customers, what they're seeking, what they need. That then helps you laser focus on what you're going to explore and investigate, and you get a better understanding of what you're actually, or what you envision you're actually going to be building in the future for your customers. The define is where, it all comes together in regards to the research you've done, what you think the customers are going to need, and you start ideally doing a prototype to be able to get feedback on whether you're thinking about the problem in the right lens. You want it to be something that you can get feedback on. So something ideally that the customers can interact with and be able to let you know, no, it's off base. My problem was actually X. You're solving for Y. Here's, the feedback I have for you. So define is really where you start to get more input around the refinements that you need to make. And then last month we talked about develop. Develop, just as it sounds, you start to build things. Now I realize, we talked about this as well with AI tools, you can build quite early. But as engineers are finding, the prototyping tools, the code, et cetera, is great, but it's got a lot of, hiccups in it. It doesn't necessarily scale well. So you still need to have, actual development happening just to make sure that everything connects, everything works, and it's something that can scale over time. With AI, again, it's amazing doing the prototyping. It's amazing doing, that code acceleration, but you still need a developer to just make sure all the pieces come together correctly and you don't have an extensive backlog that's being built as a result of that. And so from there we get to deliver, and deliver is what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to do a slightly different lens into deliver, partly because there's a lot of technology now that you can incorporate earlier into the process. And so we're going to cover more around a facet of delivery that people often save until too late. So I'll reveal what that is shortly. But here's, again, just a snapshot in case you missed the prior sessions about what we've done, where we've been, and where we're going to get to. Questions from anybody? And if you want me to go a different way, let me know. I'm very flexible. So to give more color to this, deliver is not just launching into the world and wishing it luck and sending it on its way. It's actually making sure that you're giving value to your customers, because you want them to be able to, be an advocate for you, be a champion for you. You want them to feel that they, can trust you, that you've heard their needs, that you built things in a way that really represents what they're seeking. And so the deliver phase isn't just dropping it off a cliff. It's actually where you start to be even more involved, because you have customers, you have partners, you have individuals that now ideally are in some way, shape, or form incorporating your offering into their lives. And so it's very important that there's a person, a company behind that offering. because they want to know that, things arise, that they can reach out to you, there's changes coming in your product, etc. So it isn't just a one and done, it's a one and keep on going. And so from there, what are some of the things that we think about and deliver? We think about, the business impact because we're not building things just for our health. We're building things to actually, ideally have some financial return. So you want to be able to execute, to be able to build, the offering or deliver the offering in a way that provides value. If it's something that you can't maintain, if it's something that you can't scale, then your value is short-sighted because it will, give you results. It will give you revenue, for example, in a short period of time, then it'll break as you scale customers, as you scale your business. So the real consideration, that you need to factor into is, does it satisfy a need with our customers? But does that need actually allow us to continue to grow our business? And does our offering support the growth that our customers hopefully will achieve as a result? Oftentimes in that deliver, you want that solution, that end result to scale. I've worked with a lot of companies where behind the scenes it's spaghetti. And so they didn't think about scaling. They didn't think about their own growth or the customer's growth. And so when you change one part of the product over in the left, for whatever reason, it negatively impacts something on the right. And that is often because they just didn't plan for scaling. There's a lot of super glue, a lot of duct tape holding the product together. So with delivery, you want to make sure that it can grow. That doesn't mean you build in all the capabilities before you launch. The exact opposite. What you want to do is ensure the foundation that you create can be built upon without someone needing a magnifying glass to unhook all the weird connections that were created. The other piece around deliver is that customer, and that's a thread throughout, is that you want to ensure that, your customer is getting the value that they expected based on, the work that you did alongside them in discover and define and develop. And so they're still, heavily involved as they should be, and they're giving you feedback, and you need to be able to respond to that feedback and continue to iterate upon it. And that last bit then is really taking that early stage idea, probably using AI in some capacity, and building it out so it is an offering that can do those prior circles, that can scale, that can support the business, that can grow with your customers, and something that you can expand on as well. So deliver is extremely important. And often, again, people think about it as a one and done, and it's not. You're just, essentially starting the motions all over again. And so broken it down into these couple pieces, it's always nice to have these frameworks. But in that build, you're often going from that prototype that you had earlier in the stages and you're building it out to an MVP. I'm going to use that phrase MVP because your solution is, again, never done. There's always more that you want to add on. There's always additional things that, the customer will come back with. And that's good. So that means they're using your product. It means they have feedback and insight that they want to share with you as well. And so you want to be able to, have this minimum viable product be an opportunity for you to get feedback so you can continue to grow on it. And so, it will get to a point where you can take off that acronym, call it, product, whatever name you want to use, that typically launch with that or deliver with that MVP first and then start to grow and scale based on the feedback you get. And that again gets us out of the mindset of it needs to be perfect in order for it to launch. Perfection isn't real. It isn't something that we ever get to. There's always other things we could have done. There's always different ways we could do things. Some customers will like it, some customers don't. So that MVP mindset also opens us up to the iterations that are going to happen. When you launch a product, you then want to be able to do so in a controlled manner. You'll often see companies do betas. Google is the one who started that a long time ago, but it's still quite common. You release it to, a small set of people, you get feedback from those customers, typically friends or family, you may call them friendlies, but they're the ones who are going to give you honest and blunt feedback before it goes broader. And so do really recommend identifying that user pool right in the beginning that's going to give you feedback and blunt feedback. They're not going to churn because, they're there because they believe in your offering, but they also believe in you. And so they're going to give you some direct feedback in regards to how you can make improvements. Once I've identified those improvements, you want to be able to measure them. You want to show that, the changes you've made have actually done what they're supposed to. And that's where you get into, tracking all the metrics. Are people using the capabilities that we thought they would use? Are customers staying or are they attriting? Where are customers actually, where do we see that aha moment where we understand that they really got the feature and they really are excited about it? And that's the feature that causes them to stay. So there's a lot of metrics that you want to be able to start tracking at that deliver stage to be able to understand what is the way the customer is using the product. And especially from a startup perspective, that measurement is key because oftentimes you pivot and you thought you had an idea that was exactly what the customer needs, but through your measurement, you identify that there's one or two capabilities that they're just spending all of their time on. And maybe that's something you should double down on. And folks know the story behind Slack, how it was a gaming company. And they found that the platform that they were using to talk to each other during the games actually was doing better from a customer retention perspective than the games themselves. And so that's where Slack came from. So there are a lot of companies. Instagram has a similar story as well, where they started with something, went through all the stages, had some traction, but they found through the analysis that another part of the feature or the number part of the product was actually doing above and beyond what they expected. And then they pivoted and started to focus in on that. And then ultimately, you want to get to that growth. You want to be able to grow your business. So this is a nice way just to think about the process. Yeah, go, Shauna.
Hi, I know it's something really small. I'll show my face. You said MVP,
Yeah,
but in the Bay Area, they're sometimes calling it MLP now.
minimal
Most
livable.
lovable profit. I don't know if you care or anything. Is that a thing? I like
Yeah,
MVP.
I think it's a great one. I think companies will choose the words that they want to use. I know lovable is now a product, so sometimes it gets
Yeah.
kind of confusing. Or you talk about lovable the company, you talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, lovable is great because I think you're highlighting a wonderful point that you want the customer to really, really love it. To be something that they want that, causes them to go, oh my God, you've heard my prayers, you're listening to my dreams, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so I love that lovable.
The
Yeah.
little phrase that they're using. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
product loves to come up with new ideas. Like,
Yeah.
let's give it a name. Okay,
I'm
thank
I'm
you.
gonna say, yeah,
Just want
great
to know
question.
your opinion.
Yeah. I think it's great. MVP is probably the more, it's the more traditional one, but I love, yeah, the lovable helps to highlight that you want it to be something that the customer actually loves. That's something they actually want. So I
Yeah.
like that.
Awesome.
Cool. All righty. So let's start with this. And the reason is because there's a lot to cover and deliver. Most companies will have different analytics platforms. Growth is again something that will go to market. So there are a lot of different ways to tackle that. So we're going to start here. So we're going to think about build. And I love this statement because it goes back to what I was saying that you're never going to be perfect. There is never going to be perfection. If you think there is or you want there to be, I'm sorry. You're going to sit there and you're going to build something amazing and no one's going to know about it. So I love this quote just because it really is the truth. You need to put things out there to be able to get feedback. And, the AI tools that are coming through, Shauna made me think of Lovable. We've talked about Bolt. We've talked about others. Those are enabling you to get feedback early, but you should never stop getting feedback and you should never wait for your product to be perfect. Just get it out there, have people give you feedback, be prepared to make fast changes, but if somebody wants you to change something, that means they actually cared enough about it to share that feedback with you. And that's a huge win. So love this quote. And so how do you launch quickly? There's a lot of AI tools that you can use now to be able to launch quickly. You can do things from Figma directly into, a website. You can do things with, integrations and all these other tools to be able to launch things even faster than you've ever been able to do things before. So I don't think delivery is a gap or a hurdle, but it is something that you want to be able to, leverage the tools that are out there now to be able to get that feedback. And I like this picture because it shows all the ways that you can capture that feedback and then action it. Because a lot of the tools that are pictured here are now connected or could be connected through MCP or other things. So you can actually just start powering more information for your team or yourself to be able to know what you want to continue to refine. I think there was a hand, but I missed who it was. Somebody had a question.
It was a statement in a messages.
Whoever it is, what was your message?
I think he may have left, but he says, not an expert in product, but I believe there might be a potential trap in using lovable versus valuable. Came across entrepreneurs that focus too much on the UI aspect of the product to make it delightful instead of focusing on bringing in that value that's needed, especially that's sought out by early adopters.
Yeah, it's viable, not valuable anyway.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Long day.
No, he wrote valuable, but technically the term is viable.
Yes, thank you.
Good feedback. All right. And so how do you launch quickly and iterate today? Again, there are a lot of tools just sharing, indications around what folks are using today. If you're a product person, you probably follow Lenny in some way, shape, or form. He's got a podcast, he's got a newsletter, and he's got, a Slack group and just amazing insight. So he just did, an analysis around, what people are using for coding. GitHub is still the favorite, which makes sense. But all these others are starting to appear more as well. GitHub has GitHub Copilot because they're owned by Microsoft. But a lot of these other tools, cursors popping up, I'm guessing this is probably changing on a day-to-day basis. So whereas Deliver used to be, I'm going to say, quote, expensive, they're now cheaper tools, relatively speaking, that can allow you to do coding much rapidly. And so you are seeing individuals, or companies with one or two people. And that's because a lot of the tools that exist now, some of the ones on this slide allow you to do things that you couldn't have been able to do before because they would require more people to actually get to that end result. Now you can use these tools to be able to essentially, do things a lot faster just because of the capabilities that they provide. Right. And just, going through it a bit more, the person who left may have been also referring to some of the vibe coding. And so, you get into the vibe of what you want to build and you're able to talk to the tool and the tool does the starting point for you. And that's great. It can get a lot of the way for you, but you still want to have the ability to make sure that it works, to make sure that you're not ending up with a huge backlog, that it doesn't break, that, the connections to, the tools that you have, et cetera, need to happen. So it can get you pretty far, but there's still pieces behind the scenes that you need to do to make it work. And I like this last bit because what's happening now is because of the AI tools that are available, people have more capacity to be able to create, more personalized experiences. And so when you think about, your offering in the market, before it was kind of you had this niche and you were focusing on the specific audience, and that is very true. But even within that niche, there are going to be different flavors or different ways that people are interacting. With the interactive tools now, through AI, you can get to this point of having almost a personalized experience per customer. You still have that foundation and your product's still about a specific space, but you can almost get to that point of having a personalized experience per customer. All right. And then just some of the development tools, again, just sharing what a lot of people are using. We've got our friends in the chat bots. I mean, there are others here. The cloud tools, the Replets, the Bolts, the V0, Lovable, and, there's even more there. And then the ones at the end, they all end up, connecting back to. And so this is just, helping to give you an idea or a view into the tools that you can use to be able to build out that deliver part of your stack. All right. Jump into launch. If you have never heard of Noble, I'm a big fan of them. They're a consultancy and they do a lot in the innovation space. But you want to be able to think about your business. And this prompt is a really good one. What are my competitors hoping? I'm too scared, slow, or polite to change. And so you always want to be essentially thinking about yourself, your business. But again, it makes sense to think about your competitors, and they may be the ones who are doing a certain thing that they feel is unique. But if you challenge them in a certain way, you want to make sure that it could be something that is a differentiator. So I like this quote because what do my competitors not think I'm going to do? And then could I do it? Because if they're not prepared for me to do it, it's going to take a little bit for them to react. And that allows you to have, be able to create a mode or differentiation from your competitors. So when you think about it, how do you create that differentiation? And Deliver brings to mind coding, but there's a lot of other things that are involved with deliver and a lot of other things that could actually cause, your competitors to go shit. And so, for example, the items we talk about here are about business models and money and how you position yourself. And so there's a lot of reach you can have beyond the product to be able to deliver successfully. And so the items here are outside of that coding lens, but they are equally powerful. The business model that you have can prove quite sticky and cause people to come back or share information with you that could be a moat, for example, that your competitors cannot cross. Your pricing strategy could be so enticing or so just relevant to them that it's a no-brainer in regards to the decision that they make. And all of that comes back to, I would say, to Lyle's piece around the branding, because that is equity that you have with your customers. And that makes it harder for a competitor to be able to take your customers away. If you have that competitive positioning that differentiates you and you back it up, then that again is harder for your competitors just to recreate. They'll be inauthentic if they try to. So these elements are very, very important for Deliver as well, and for the success of the offering that you're bringing to market. So diving into it a bit further, and again, I'm not going to go through tools because there's so many and because they're changing on a daily basis. So what I'm going to talk more about are pieces that are probably, overlooked, but they're equally important in Deliver. And so here you can see the examples of those business models. A business model is pretty complicated. There's a lot of opportunities that you can have for going to market and being able to deliver your offering. You may decide that, you want to do it in a transactional one-off basis. People buy your product, you wait till they're done with your product and they buy another one. Subscription and memberships, we're probably all familiar with. A lot of the software tools that are out there now really love those. They often start with a freemium or an upsell to dive down. But these are, again, examples of how you could build a business model. And all of this, again, informs the potential success or opportunities that you would have when you go to market. So again, even though they're not technical, these aspects of Deliver are equally important in regards to what you could do. Oops, come on screen. There we go. So this is an exercise you can do with the folks on your team. If you want to be able to better understand your business model and your approach, you can do this exercise. So we help X to do Y by doing Z. And it goes back to some of the problem statements that we were talking about earlier, but that really helps you identify that Z. And that Z is a unique piece, which informs how you're going to do your pricing or how you're going to do your positioning or how you're going to go to market. And again, all of this ties back to Deliver. So if you have a team, take a picture of this slide. I'll share out the slides afterwards. But this is a really good exercise to run. Just be able to really lock down the value that you provide, and that consequently informs the business model or the pricing model that you're going to introduce. And so here's just some ways to do it. For a coffee subscription company, we help, as you can see here, we help the world wake up by delivering internationally curated coffee. You may know who that is, just a guess. For a B2B software company, you can see it here. For pinching services, you can see it here. So again, these are probably brands you're familiar with, but this exercise, doing it for yourself, really helps you identify your differentiation and then helps you to lock down how you want to go to market. Okay. And so here's, again, just a way to think about it when you go through the exercise with your team. You want to think about your customer. How are you helping them? Those are all things that we've learned from the prior months in regards to going through that discover, define, and develop. We've got really good handle on that. The goal, again, should be very clear. We started that earlier, but your solution is what we're now really locking down into. And so we want to ensure that what we're introducing to the market, what we're delivering really provides value. And we want to take a guess around what that value is. We should have hypotheses that we've explored from earlier stages, but now we're really going to test it in the wild. Okay. And so, again, a lot of what's happening now is introducing new models. So, shared some of the models before. The questions, that we just talked through still apply, but there are new ways that you can actually do things now. So, I wanted to introduce them. One of them is human in the loop. And so a lot of companies have, AI that is serving as their product, either in a full capacity or a partial capacity. And so having a human in the loop, a human that actually helps with some of the tasks is a differentiator. And so that offering of a human as someone who can add additional value is a benefit to customers and also then informs how you may potentially charge for your product or how you would bring it to market. So again, thinking about traditional offerings, which I showed on the prior slides, they're new models that are being introduced because of AI, and that may be something that you want to consider as well. Another one is consumption-based and dynamic pricing. This in the SaaS space tends to come and go. Definitely happens more now with the tools being more token oriented, more usage oriented. A lot of companies are starting to think about, how much do you use and then consequently charging for that. It's typically a combination of a subscription model and then a consumption based model based on how much of the offering the tool that you consume. Your customer is then charged at a specific rate for a specific period of time. And so it's adding in additional factors around that pricing that then inform the subscription and the subsequent tiers that are being rolled out. So again, from a deliver perspective, there's a lot of ways that you can deliver your product towards market. You want to think about how your product was built, how it's consequently going to be consumed, and that can then inform the business model that you want to explore and introduce. Another one is an AI-enabled marketplace. So the marketplace used to be one that you'd have to build up over time. Now you can have a lot of that matchmaking done in an automated way. That means the results, as it's showing here, happen much faster. And so the marketplaces are starting to look at ways to go almost to an outcome-based model. You charge a certain rate for having access to the marketplace, but then what happens is you actually have a certain amount of results that are expected based on the tier. Some companies are saying if you don't get those results, you can get a certain amount back, but they're guaranteeing a certain percentage of matching in that marketplace because of AI. That's, again, introducing a new dynamic into marketplaces. And again, marketplaces have been around for a while, a long time, but AI is introducing a way to do that matching even faster, more efficiently. So just questions for the group. Love to know what you think around, AI. Is it something that you're building in or considering? Are there ways that you can use it or are using it to actually explore your business model? So love to know from some of you guys who what you think.
Can I speak?
Go for it.
Hey, Diana. So yeah, I like AI. Like it's really good to use like when you prototype and you could get a prototype out there and you could show to other people, but you still have to have like your developers work on it because you run into a lot of issues, a lot of things break. And I experienced that too. But AI is good to like if you prototyping and stuff like that.
And I think if I remember correctly, your job is IT or something along those lines. So you must face a lot of that every day.
Yes, 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 yes.
Very cool. Love it. Others that have questions or views on these questions.
Well, we're using the Nexus platform and it has an AI matching on there. It just, AI is just going to keep permeating into everything, if that's the right word. You can't do business without it, the way it looks like to me. And it's been embedded in other things I've used before, so I don't see it going away so quickly. Kind of excited and also scared a little bit.
I have a SaaS client that's in the middle of raising capital to finish its build and go to market. And AI was a central component in augmenting the capability of the tool. It's not about being AI first or AI led. In fact, that as a differentiator is slowly dying. So little by slow, all the people are saying we're an AI company or we're AI first or AI led. That that won't matter because everything is AI. So it becomes a tool and it's not a distinguishing element. It's not a point of difference. It's a tool. So, and that change is happening right before your eyes right now. So,
Yeah. And that's where I think the human in the loop is also coming from as well, is like actually having a human involved is back to being a differentiator. So it's an interesting kind of a circle that we're seeing. Cool. All right. I'll keep us moving forward. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on pricing because I think it's a dark art that people often overlook. I think there's a lot of value to thinking about your pricing and being able to price strategically, because you can actually gain a lot of customers just through your pricing being clear and understandable. I've worked at companies where we only had 2 tiers of offerings. As a result, the lower tier was not low enough for entry-level people. The higher tier, which was our second tier, wasn't robust enough for people at the enterprise level. So based on our pricing of having 2 tiers, we actually missed a big portion of the market. We missed the people at the entry because our first tier was too expensive. We missed people at the end because our higher tier wasn't comprehensive enough. So how you price and package your products can again inform how successful you're going to be. At a very basic level, what you're looking at is a math equation of, how much revenue do you need to make to cover your costs, and that becomes your profits. So things to think about when you're looking at it. I can get some of my, information from my marketing and sales and acquisitions. All those efforts should hopefully give me revenue in some way, shape, or form. They all cost money too. You can think about the costs, all the things that you need to spend money on. Some of those carry over here. Obviously, in an enterprise space, you may have, outsourcing that you need to consider. You may have supply chain that you need to consider. So all those things that you spend money on help inform how much money you're going to make. So at a basic level, you need to think about all this to do your pricing. But there's more onto it as well. You want to be able to optimize your pricing so that you're going to make, some type of profitability. And that profitability is going to allow you to gain more market share, because essentially it goes back into the business so that you can continue doing what you're doing and reaching more customers. So it's a nice loop. The revenue isn't the end result. It's how do you use that revenue to be able to continue to grow your share in the market. And right now, exactly as Lyle said, AI is a commodity. There's a lot of companies doing AI. So just having AI isn't sufficient. A lot of them are doing things around pricing to be able to grow their business and gain market share so that they can have a impact that will allow them to continue to expand their reach. So they're using pricing as a lever. All right. Another way to think about it is B2B versus B2C. And so when you're thinking about your offering and how you're going to go to market and what you're going to do, the B2B to B2C is often a common question, consideration that people are going through. There's obviously variations of this as well, B to B to C, it's, all those types of mixes too. But at a basic level, here's some of the differentiations between the two, what you could do. B2B, you're going to have a bigger ticket, but it's going to take longer to close the sale. They're going to want to negotiate everything. B2C has, a lot more reach, a lot more potential, but people are fickle. There's a higher likelihood that they're going to trade because another offerings come along. So a lot of things to consider. And when you think about it as well, depending on B2B or B2C, the pricing that you give should then go back to the brand that you are conveying. So reminding us back to Lyle's exercises and what we discovered with our customers, even though there could be another offering in the market, you could use price to differentiate yourself. So the research that you did during Discover, the prototyping that you did during Deliver, all of that could come together to say, I'm going to do something that, actually exists in the market. I'm just going to do it in a different way. And I believe that there's reach or potential in that. Your pricing can then help you to be a differentiator. So I love this example about water because it's all the same thing, but what it actually is the price is a differentiator. The price and the packaging, all that comes together. You're still producing, putting the same thing inside of a bottle, but how you're actually delivering it is the differentiator.
Diana, that reminds me of liquid death. 1.4 billion market cap, delivering water in a can. Water. It's all about the marketing, right? It's just
Yep.
crazy.
Yep, totally. Go to any concert, you're going to see Liquid Death. It feels cool to be able to walk around with Liquid Death. It's water. So yeah, definitely happens. But I love the fact that, again, now the technology is often the commodity. The differentiation in delivery often comes back to, the business model and the pricing. So that's again why I wanted to do something slightly different than what you may have expected, but I think it's becoming more important today. All right. And then, the water example goes back to what do people value? Depending on your customer, depending on the audience that you're leaning towards, and you use that and understood that, captured that, during the earlier stages that we went through, you can get a good understanding around that flexibility that you may have in regards to your business model. What is the type of thing that they're willing to pay more for? And that often goes back to those capabilities, those features where you see your customers are spending the most time. That can give you an indication that if you charged more potentially for those features or capabilities, they probably wouldn't leave. And so that gives you some opportunity to introduce new pricing tiers, for example, or even just, to have a different product that has those capabilities constrained in it, and then you can price accordingly. So there's a lot you can do once you understand the value your customers place on what you're offering. And that ties back into what are they actually doing? Where are they spending time in your product? And that goes to the measurement piece we were talking. All right. And so from there, just building out the framework, this is a fun one when you think about it. And it's from, a Harvard Business Review article. And so it's kind of throwing a bunch of models on its head. But essentially, when we think about the way that you're pricing something, you're going to look at these core elements. Functional probably doesn't allow you to charge as much as you would expect. It's kind of that commodity game. The hope is that every product does these things. The emotional element is often where you can do some pricing differentiation because you're really, really connecting with a person. You're connecting with a person on an emotional level. You're going inside of their mind in a sense. And so this is often where you can have some more differentiation and have more flexibility in regards to your pricing. We go back to the water, those water examples, the different packaging, what Michael just shared, all of that is going to an emotional level. And consequently, you can charge more around that because of the emotions it creates. Life-changing is a little bit more exclusive. But again, if you can get into that point of the pyramid, then there's a lot of elements that a lot of levers that you have to pull that again allow you to do more pricing variability. The self-transcendent, that social impact is extremely rare, but again, there's some companies can get to that point. So depending on where you are, the value that you provide to your customer, you have the opportunity to move up the pyramid and consequently charge more for your offering as a result. Just like this one. And this is just showing different ways that it happens. I have this exercise that I've run with folks before. Again, just wanted to give you guys a view into it so that you can take it and run it with your teams. But it's all about, defining that business model. And that business model, again, is going to allow you to have differentiation in the marketplace. And so I use this analogy of a castle. And so your business model allows you to be able to do things with your castle. So I won't put you through the pressure of asking you to answer the question, but it's kind of a teaser. What does a business model and a castle have in common? Which is probably not something you've thought of on a daily basis, but there's a lot in common. The castle has a drawbridge. There's the castle itself, and there's the moat. And if we turn those into business model, there's some commonalities. You determine who comes in and out of your castle through rules. Those rules also inform your business model. So your drawbridge and your rules have some commonalities. Your castle hopefully doesn't float. I haven't seen many floating castles, so it's probably on some type of foundation. That foundation is, your offering in the business model, in the product context. And then that proprietary is your moat. It's something that someone else can't create. Yes, they could create another moat around another castle, but the water's yours. It's something there that's personal to you. It's special to your product, and it isn't something that can be recreated that easily. So there is a commonality between a castle and a business model. In case you could want to use that in a trivia night. And then from there, just breaking it down even further, that castle again, it's easy to build another castle. So that foundation element isn't necessarily something that customers are going to see value in. If they go to a competitor, chances are they're going to have a foundation. Otherwise, they're going to sink into the moat. The moat is the area that allows you to really differentiate yourself. The dragons in the moat or the alligators in the moat, again, could be a differentiation. So all those unique nuances you have. And I like the example of, the moat being that element that's proprietary, because that's often your strategy. Again, that goes back to, how you're going to market those unique elements to your business. That again is where you have a lot of opportunity to be able to price things differently. The rules, the drawbridge determines who gets access to your product. Sometimes you can control those rules. You don't want someone just to come into your castle. Sometimes they do jump over your drawbridge. So you got some flexibility there. But those rules really determine, the offering's position in the market, because there may be some pricing decisions that you're making that make it so that certain customers, for example, couldn't afford your product, and that's part of your rules. So these three elements are, again, things to think about when you're trying to define how you want to approach your pricing for your product, and consequently how it's going to be positioned in the market, which ties back to delivering into the market. And then I always like, the images and the visuals. So what you want to do is be able to think about, when you're defining your castle, your moat, and your drawbridge, what do you need to be able to do? And you think about that foundation as like that elements that have to be there. And then you want to flesh out those pieces that are unique to you. And that becomes those proprietary, that moat piece that really is your differentiator. And then you use those rules to determine, how you're really going to grow, who you're going to be able to provide your offering to. So again, it all comes together to give you that focus on what your differentiation is, and consequently how you're going to go to market, right? And so often it comes down to a couple decisions. So again, this is a great exercise you guys can do with your teams, but just think about, the offering, the market, how you're doing things internally, the competition, the economics that are, happening around us, and then the type of time and scope and effort that goes into it all. So again, when you're thinking about how you're going to create your business model, how you're going to build your castle, your moat, and the drawbridge, these are factors to keep in mind. All right. So again, a question to think about and to consider. I think it's a good one just to really think about, what is proprietary and what you're doing. Right now, there's a lot of conversations around context being the differentiator. That often translates into data. So data is a differentiator right now. The human in the loop is actually, I believe, going to start being more a differentiator too. People are going to pay more or want to be able to actually have an interaction with a human. I know all of us have probably been in a phone tree or a queue sometimes, which drives us insane. So if you get to a person, how much is that worth to you? So again, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities in that proprietary space to differentiate ourselves, even though technology is making it easier to build. All right. And then the other thing, just as you guys have highlighted in your questions and the comments, and we talked about in the prior sessions, the world doesn't stay still. Products don't stay still. Technology doesn't stay still. So even though you may be in a good place today, have that conversation with your team, yourself, et cetera, to think about, are we ready to do some type of evolution? Are we ready to actually continue to evolve? Because our customers aren't static. Consequently, we cannot be static either. And so just have that be a conversation. I think that lines back to a lot of the tools, from an AI perspective. Do the tools that we're using actually allow us to evolve? And are they going to support us in that evolution? Because again, if you do something great, that's wonderful, but someone's eventually going to come along with an offering that's even better. And it's nothing on your fault, to say that you did something, that you shouldn't have. But it's just that's the way the market is. And so are you ready to be able to evolve and continue to surpass expectations of your customers? All right. And I think that's, where we're at today. We're close to time. So I think we probably have, a spot for one question if you guys wanted it.
I,
And
I
I
just
will
want
share stuff out.
I wanted to thank you, Diana, for leading the last 4 sessions. Super, super educational for me and for everyone else. And thank you very much. We'll be transitioning to a sales go-to-market in September. And previously, I wanted to point out that Lyle, who's on the call, did the 4 previous to that on marketing and is available to chat when you'd like, or Diana or me or anyone via Slack or LinkedIn or however you, whatever platform you choose. But this was super interesting. And I'm actually going to post Friday. I'm going to use your little castle moat thing and just post something to LinkedIn, and
Cool.
I'll attribute it back to you. And I'm not sure who it came from originally, but I was fascinated by that, and I think it's there's a lot. Like no matter how much you're learning, there's more to learn, and that's the whole point of the Gildre community. So thank you, Anna.
Yeah, it was a great series, Diana. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Have fun, and I will talk to you guys later. Thank you. Bye.